Every day, each of us face moral decisions. Some decisions carry significant moral responsibility. What is the right thing to do? How do I know what is right and wrong? If you ask most people how they determine what is right and wrong, they will reply something like, "It's the way I was brought up," or "That's the way God wants me to," or "That's what all my friends think we ought to do." Many of us, however, wonder about these standard answers. We read history, study science and philosophy, read newspapers, and talk to other open-minded people. We conclude that parents, teachers, priests, kings, holy books often tell us to think and do things that just feel wrong at the gut level. Burning witches alive at the stake, for instance, it's God's will. Answering questions about what is right and wrong, good or evil, true or false, are the most difficult tasks human beings confront in their lives. As humanists, we have decided not to attempt to address these questions by relying on God's prophets, priests, angels, demons, spirits, witches, astrologers, hermits, voices in our heads, dreams, hallucinogenic drugs, old books written by people we don't know anything about. But we humans are still faced with the awesome responsibility of finding answers to these moral and existential questions. Let us start with what I believe is the easiest of the questions, the question of what is true or false. To ascertain truth about the universe we live in, as a humanist, I choose the method of science. Science is the antithesis of faith-based methods of the mystics and spiritualists. Science is a methodology for approaching truth that has accumulated knowledge through the efforts of thousands of people over many centuries. It continually evolves, and nothing science has produced is immune to skepticism. At any point in time, science gives us the nearest approximation to truth that humanity is capable of. Now let us look at the more difficult questions concerning morality, good and evil, actions that are right or wrong. Today I will discuss whether science can address moral issues. As a humanist, I think this is possible. I'm going to skip this part because Sandra thinks it's too long. Science tells us that human beings are animals. We emerged under the forces of biology, genetics, and evolution. We are social, predatorial mammals, and as such, we share modes of behavior that are similar to other predatorial mammalian species that are social. Some examples are wolf packs, chimpanzee bands, killer whales, and lion prides. These animal species exhibit altruism, loyalty, protective behavior, cooperative behavior for the common good, and they have complex communication systems that allow the group members to express approval or disapproval of the moral behavior of others. Sometimes it appears to us humans that other species exhibit empathy towards other members of their group. It is hard to argue that such primitive morality is not tied to, and in fact caused by, survival of the fittest and evolution. Such morality is clearly in our genes. We humans don't like to believe that our own morality is basically genetic. We like to think that our morality is passed down culturally from the wisdom of our ancestors. We must remember, however, that we evolved genetically from species that did not have our complex verbal intelligence and could not have passed down complex moral ideas. I agree with E.O. Wilson that our basic moral sense developed genetically from simpler social morality of our ancestor species. That is, our tribal morality is an extension of the pack morality of our progenitors. Starting with that primitive group morality, our genetics were changed by the forces of evolution to modify our bodies and more especially the wiring of our brains in an extremely complex feedback loop to produce a species, us, that can not only act morally, but to converse with other members about what morality is. This ability to use language, of course, also allows us to pass down other complex ideas, like hunting and gathering techniques. This language-based culture system has given Homo sapiens a supercharger for our evolution. But as complex as this superpower is, it is still based on evolution. This power has allowed us to burst out of Africa and quickly control and kill off most of the other species in the world that we grew up in. Tribal morality is a major component of this supercharger. For details, I refer to E.O. Wilson. There is, however, a real downside to tribal morality. It is an us versus them morality. Wolf packs violently compete with other wolf packs. Most wolf deaths are the result of attack by other wolves. Human tribal morality leads to similar results. We call it xenophobia. We kill each other, that is, members of our own species, just like wolves do. As the technology of human culture exploded over the last few millennia, tribes became larger, leading to political systems like city-states that went beyond the small pack level of our species. Sometime around 3,000 years ago, there emerged a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at human interactions, that is, morality. The time of that change is referred to as the axial age. The key difference in moral thinking evolved around the ideas of the time. Maybe we should include, the idea was maybe we should include them, that is, other human beings, in with us. This allowed the formation of larger and more complex societies, led to the formation of the first truly multicultural empire, the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was underpinned by the first monotheistic religion, Zoroastrianism, which is not built around capricious, amoral gods who demand our groveling worship. Instead, it was concerned with the battle between the forces of good and evil. that is morality. There were many historical figures involved in this transition: the Buddha, Anaxagoras, Jesus, Socrates, and Confucius. We must note, however, that the transition from tribal morality to multicultural morality happened way too quickly for genetic changes to have played much of a part. From this point on, the evolution of morality was built on a new genetic code, the written word. With the Greeks, there arose an amalgamation of science and philosophy and this multicultural morality. In this, I see the first glimmers of humanism. So here we are in the 21st century, with the battle between science and religion still raging. Humanists must still make moral decisions. I, as a humanist, side with science and believe that we must make our own morality and make it with brains designed in the Stone Age. We could follow the existentialists and decide to go it alone. A better path, I think, is to follow the method similar to that of science. Work with other open-minded people, those who realize that we are stuck with Stone Age minds. We can work together, discuss, experiment with morality. We can share and record our experiences, learning from our past mistakes and successes. We should realize that the old forces of survival of the fittest is built into our Stone Age brains, and we must overcome it. I believe that this is the purpose of groups like the UUFB Humanist group. I believe that our goal should not be the production of more human beings as fast as possible, which is what drives the pure biological evolution, but it should be to increase the well-being of all humans, and not just human beings, but the well-being of all sentient life forms on the planet. That is, we should include all other sentient beings in the us. If we succeed, we will be able to create a sea change equivalent to the achievements of the axial age. The creation of our own morality is a truly awesome responsibility.
Morality and religion go together in the minds of most people. People suppose that you need faith in some outside force to tell you what to do, that morality must be defined by religion. Our humanist group has spent a lot of time discussing morality and religion, where they come from, why people believe in things that seem unlikely to us. David talked about morality, so I'm going to give a view of the origins of religion. As a humanist, my natural path is to see things from an evolutionary point of view. Religion clearly goes back a long time, possibly to pre-human species. However, there's very little data to support any particular view of the origin of religion. Religion doesn't fossilize well, so you have to interpret artifacts. And it's worth noting that we haven't even figured out what Stonehenge was about. So it gets a little more difficult when you go back and look at cave drawings, drawings on cave walls, or ancient burial practices. And there are scientists, serious scientists, who've done some good work with this, but there is inherently a lot of speculation involved with that. So I'm going to cite a few authorities, but much of what I have to say is my own speculation and conclusions based on what I've read. And when I started writing this bit of the sermon, I realized just how little I knew. There actually is quite a lot written on this, so this is kind of a first and second pass on my part. In his book, The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins asks us to imagine an alien spaceship coming to Earth and observing religious practices and scratching their heads, or whatever they think with, wondering at the purpose of it all. The aliens see our towering cathedrals and pyramids that are awe-inspiring, but they don't seem to have a purpose. They don't serve as shelters. Nobody lives in them. We don't put livestock in them or store grain there. We put a lot of resources into these structures, but what do they do to improve the odds of survival? Even more than the structures we build, religious behavior seems bizarre. People mutilate themselves in the name of their religion. They kill others. They make sacrifices, both animal and human. I'm especially struck by the prevalence of child sacrifice in some cultures. But putting aside our moral shock at this behavior, killing your own offspring is singularly the worst thing you can do if you want to spread your genes and win the fight for survival and proliferation. These incongruities lead Dawkins and others to propose that religion does not have a direct evolutionary advantage, but instead it's a side effect of something else which does give us an edge. Some authors have suggested that religion occupies a specific part of the brain, and you may have heard the God spot mentioned. That's been pretty well debunked. There isn't a particular part of the brain that does this, but religion is clearly a product of brain function. I've also heard atheists describe religion as a product of brain malfunction, and I'll come to that in a little bit. Darwin commented that it's difficult to imagine that belief in God is anything but a structure of brain heredity. In his book, Evolving Brains, Emerging Gods, E. Fuller Torrey cites evidence to support the idea that our brains evolve through several stages. About 2 million years ago, we started developing larger brains, and they use a lot of resources. So to get a big brain, our brains had to have a great evolutionary advantage, likely sociability, and less reliance on instinct. As brain size increased, our ancestors developed an awareness of self. And perhaps 200,000 years ago, Torrey says that early Homo sapiens became aware of other people's thoughts. Roughly 100,000 years ago, our ancestors acquired the ability to reflect on their own thoughts. So to me, this sounds a lot like the development of the soul, seeing ourselves detached from our physical bodies. Our humanist group has discussed the soul quite a bit in recent months, too. Finally, about 40,000 years ago, we developed autobiographical memory, the ability to project ourselves backwards and forwards in time. This would give us the ability to plan for the future, which is a big advantage. But what I find of interest here is that by projecting forward in time, we would also become keenly aware of our own mortality. Oh my God, we're all going to die, right? So it seems to me that that's a really important stage in human development. And I think awareness of our own mortality was a huge evolutionary mistake. We need to focus on the present to meet the challenges of our lives. Think about a ground squirrel sticking its head out of its hole. It's living in the present, looking out for threats and opportunities, potential mates, food, and competitors. It doesn't think about its own death or the death of family and friends, at least not that we know of. Now suppose that the ground squirrel becomes aware it's going to die. Now it's a bit melancholic. It thinks about mommy and daddy and its own coming death. And that's when it misses the shadow of the hawk that comes down and grabs it, right? So it seems to me that a creature that's struggling to survive, it's best for it to live in the here and now. And we humans can struggle with this too. Right here in our sanctuary, in every service, we have a moment of silence where we get centered on the here and now. For a minute or two, we try to cast aside our basic human propensity to think about the past and the future. We have self-help books and mindfulness classes to keep us in the present moment. A ground squirrel doesn't have to do that. So I think that religion was invented as a cultural answer to this evolutionary big mistake, a side effect of brain malfunction, essentially. Sure, you're going to die, but you're going to the happy hunting ground, and you're going to see Grandma and Grandpa and maybe your dog Roof. So take your mind off the future, child, and see death as a release and a promise of better things. That's why religion got going. That's my speculation. I won't attribute that to anybody else. There are other functions of religion that could also give rise to why it's here and why it perpetuates itself. Religion gives social stability and cultural identity. It supports the power structure of society and allows the chief and other elites to exercise power over other members of the group. And our humanist group talks about that issue quite a bit too. There's also a connection between religion and storytelling. We depend much less on instinct than other animals do, so we pass along information from generation to generation. And the stories we tell are more memorable if they contain wild elements that are outside of our normal experiences, like spirits or heroes battling in the sky. Today we have fantasy novels and horror stories, ghosts and goblins, Bigfoot stories, and this shows us the same thing, that supernatural stories get our attention more than normal goings-on of our lives. Religion takes advantage of that, describing beings that share some of our human traits, but also can walk through walls or have other abilities outside of the natural world. So, as for the connection between religion and morality, we know that humans began as small groups of hunter-gatherers. If you know everyone in the group, you can see their everyday actions, so it's easier to detect and correct antisocial behavior. But as the tribe becomes larger, individuals won't know everyone. And when tribes turn into cities and kingdoms or nations, bad behavior will go unrecognized and uncorrected more often. Will Gervais, a researcher on religion and atheism, speculates that the expanding size of the tribe might lead to making a god more powerful. The eye-in-the-sky God, who sees everything, knows when you are sleeping, knows when you've been bad or good, that kind of God. The God that can read your mind. This is a great way of controlling behavior as a tribe grows. And then the final achievement of many religions is to enforce moral dictates by punishment after death. You must follow the rules, and even if you escape punishment in this world, you'll never escape it in the next world. So, as a humanist and a Unitarian Universalist, I'm glad to be free to explore religion using critical thinking and science, and where I don't worry that I'm going to be burned at the stake in this life or roasted on an eternal spit in the next.